what I'm going to do is hang a couple of tiles of an image for you. I may do two, maybe do three, but certainly want to show you one joint. Now it's at this point that, actually that might work, there you go. It's at this point that we would be cutting the material up, but obviously for the purpose of the demonstration you don't want to see me unrolling material, trimming all the edges up. So we've actually got these all prepared, okay? Now with this material, you remember when I said to you about emulsion paints? I'm looking a bit deformed. I said about emulsion, thank you, said about emulsion paints causing bubbles. The other cause of bubbling is that the material is not left long enough to soak. So what happens is you apply the adhesive to the wall, you wet the back, but if it hasn't had long enough to soak, then it takes on the moisture from the adhesive that's already on the wall and continues to expand and grow. So what you want to do is give the material a good wet down first, okay? Just a sponge that's been in water, just wring it out from one end to the other and just massage, spread the water into it. Now this product that we're using now is the paper backed, the Miramore, which, as Francesca said, is a more cost-effective option. But because it's paper, as I say, we need to wet it down to allow it to expand before it makes contact with the adhesive. Now what I'm doing is, we don't want that moisture to air dry. So by what we term as booking, by booking the material back to back, the moisture is allowed to soak into the backing paper. As I say, this is the paper back. The Digimura, which is the fabric back, does not need to be wet. You can simply cut the material to size and then roll it up. You roll it face in so that the backer is outermost, and then you just take it to the wall and let it drop out. It doesn't need to make any contact with the adhesive on the wall. So now what I'm going to do is apply some adhesive to the wall. Okay, I'm actually using the adhesive that I've been given here. So I've just mixed some of this up and I'm going to apply that to the wall. You only apply the material, you only apply the adhesive to the width of one piece at a time. You don't put paste the whole wall or paste 2 or 3 tiles, only one tile at a time, okay? I would say with this one, there's no instructions on the back of the packet. It's a case of just achieve the consistency that you need. So maybe 1 to 5. So if you're looking, no, 1 to 5. What am I talking about? Sorry, it's one packet to maybe 5 litres.
5 litres.
Yeah.
הוא משתמש עם זה היום, לפני זה הוא לא השתמש בחיים, הוא לא מכיר את החומר הזה. זה חומר שהוא לא עובד איתו. בסדר? מה הוא עובד? הם עובדים עם החומר הזה. משהו כזה.
Are you ready? Okay, it's very heavy. You don't use this one for the paperback. This is for the Digimura. Okay, so this very heavy adhesive is for Digimura, not Miramore. Okay, we have another adhesive for Miramore, which is it's not as thick. But it still has very strong qualities in respect of holding the material on the wall. This it will come out of the tub in one lump if I tip it upside down. Okay, I won't because I'll have to clear it up. But if you were to stir it, mix it, it's like jelly. Now, solidifies when it's cold. Take it out of the fridge, break it up with a fork, put it back in the fridge. It doesn't reset. Okay, so once you give this a good stir, it goes nice and creamy, and you can use that. But as I say, this particular one is for Miramore. For Digimura, not Miramore. Okay. Just before I carry on, you would have seen how I've folded these. My largest fold is at the top. Okay. So that I know from, if this wasn't such an obvious pattern, I would know the way I did it, the largest fold is the top. You'll see when I pick it up, the bottom I'll allow the bottom piece to drop out, and there is no need for me to allow any adhesive to get onto the face. You can see that even this adhesive, when it's still wet, is strong enough to hold the material in place while I stand around and talk to you. But it's just holding it there. If I had much more at the top, that would start to roll down, but that's okay as it is. What I can now do is then do some fine alignment into the plumb line that I put on the wall. Okay. Sorry. I'll carry on. Sorry. It's just, you'll see when I start to lay the material on the wall, I'm going to use two spatulas. One has a PTFE ball, a bead on it. That'll stop any scratching of the print if the print is fresh. Although both these work well, but the application is in an up and down motion only. You don't go side to side. If you go side to side and you stretch it, you shouldn't do, but if it does stretches, as it dries, it will recover. And if it recovers, it means the joint will open up very slightly. Now, recovery at the top and the bottom isn't an issue. You would never see that, but you will see it even if it's minute on the joint. So application with the spatula, up and down movement only. This method is exactly the same as for domestic wall coverings, but I've got a plug socket or a back box for a socket here. You have two ways of, that's okay, I have one. You have two ways, no I don't, it's on the table. You've got two ways of working with it. You can either put a pencil mark on each edge, when cutting round obstacles, fixtures and fittings like this, you can either go tight up to it. If you're going to loosen the socket, the cover plate, you can actually trim the material just inside. Like that, and then put the cover plate back on, or you can trim it round. Now when you come to cut the ceiling, internal corners, or at the skirting baseball lines, the way to remember it is to have the spatula flat to the wall, and then your knife flat to the spatula. Do not move the spatula and the knife at the same time, you will tear the material. Okay, so you make a cut holding the material in place with the spatula. When you reach the end, you move the spatula, then move the knife again. By doing it that way, what you've actually managed to achieve is just the thickness of the spatula is turned round onto the adjacent surface, whether it be ceiling, skirting, or internal angles. Okay, so if there's any deviation in that surface, the material will take it up and it will appear to the eye to be a nice straight line. Okay, it won't highlight it. Now this material, these pieces have been printed with a 50mm bleed. So we have 25mm either side of the centre point. Hey presto, what I tend to use are 50mm pins. Okay, so if your first piece is hung dead plumb, exactly vertical, then some people will then measure the next one and strike another vertical line. That's a bit superfluous because you've actually, as well as wanting to get it plumb, you want to make sure that you match the pattern. So the way to do that, I use these pins. If we've got a long drop, I have one at the top, one in the middle, one at the bottom. On here I'll only put 2 in. So hopefully everybody can see that, but where the pin head lies, just pick it up, and where the pin tip falls, just slot it into the material. Okay? Don't forget, we're talking about PVC here. This is a very flexible, flimsy film, pliable, so the pins won't do any damage. They won't leave any visible damage. So I'm going to pass the mic back over. What I'm going to do now is paste the next piece and then hang while trying to match the joint. It's important to remember that if you're doing this for real, and this is a plaster wall or a plasterboard wall, you need to make sure that while you're working or waiting to work for your neck piece, that you lift this edge up, because otherwise the adhesive can start to dry, it will stick, and then when you peel it back to make your joint, the paper will split. Okay, so just make sure that that edge is always kept live. Now what I've done there is, again, if you can imagine you're working with a material that's 1.3 wide, you've had your selvage trimmed off, so it's down to about 120, okay? And let's say I'm up a pair of steps, 3 meters off the ground, to try and match that pattern at the same time as actually hanging that individual tile. It's going to be very difficult, or it's going to make life difficult for you. So coming back to what I said, the adhesive is going to be strong enough to hold the material in place, and I purposely put it at an angle so that I can now move the material around to position it to where I want to be. Okay, but before you start doing that, always start at eye level. Okay, now I'm not particularly tall, so for that chap over there, you'll be starting up here. I'm starting down here somewhere. Okay, so but it's at the most critical point. It's where everybody's going to be seeing it. If this was, let's say we were going up to the top here, to the top of the metal plating, it's no good matching it up there and then find that it actually runs out down here where everybody can look at it. If it's going to mismatch, put it up somewhere where nobody's going to see it. Okay? It's a learning curve. Not everybody gets it right first time. I haven't done this yet, I might not get it right. Right, there's one other thing that I'm going to do before. Now I think that looks reasonably matched, I think. Possibly, slightly out there. I'll check that in a minute. Those diagonals are on, that's okay. But diagonals and curves on a printed image are very notoriously difficult to match, because you're matching it here, but you're cutting back here. Okay? So we're going to try and have a little trick to see what's going on behind it, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. I want to make sure that this circle, okay, I want to make sure that this circle matches with the one above. So I'm just going to cut a small notch into the material, and hopefully from behind you or from a distance you'll be able to see what I've done. Okay, now if anybody wants to come and have a closer look, you can see what I'm doing. By all means, effectively it looks as though it's matched, but you can see that that is slightly out, so we need to just play around with the movement. Similarly, maybe something in the eye, maybe that crescent there. And again, now I've cut a little notch in it, you can see that it's very slightly out. Okay? Point is, I haven't done a really detailed, intricate match. I'm just doing this to show you. Now I'm going to use those two notches and a slight misalignment of that to hopefully put it all in place. Thank you. And hopefully you can see what I'm doing is just coming down at each and every match point to try and make sure that it's aligned. So this kind of seems very aware that I'm trying to just explain this to you. and give you all the finer points in a very short space of time. This is something that anybody, once you start working with the material, or anybody that has been using it before for any length of time, will do automatically, and it really doesn't slow the process down at all. The only other thing I need to mention to you is when you do cut the notch, don't cut in too deep, because if you do, you're going to cut into your overlap. Okay, so you need to make sure that any notches that you cut in don't go anywhere near the halfway mark between your overlap. It's at this point that if you have got, I haven't got any adhesive on there, but we've got adhesive on what effectively is our sealing. So you want to wipe that down before it dries. So don't do more than 2 or 3 drops before you wipe it down. If I was just now to wipe that though, effectively the adhesive gets on the sponge and I end up just wiping it onto the face of the material. When it dries, it will be visible. So I'm going to use the spatula just as a guard to protect, to prevent any adhesive going onto the wall covering. So most people, I've done training in probably about 8 or 9 European countries. They will just use a snap blade knife or a Stanley knife and cut, hopefully with a straight edge, but we'll cut straight through both pieces. And you saw from the slide what will happen. So we need to protect the wall. Everything is in 50mm. The overlap's 50mm, the pins are 50mm, and that's 50mm wide. Okay, so we're going to peel the material back. Obviously this wall is quite short by comparison, but if we were working on all sides, you would need one full length, and then you would take a second piece, cut it to size to complete the wall length. Okay, and just butt the 2 up. I'm going to trim this one down so that it fits. So we've got a protective, what we term as protective plastic strip. Protective because it protects the wall. Okay, you're going to cut through both layers. I'm going to put this behind the wall covering. You're going to cut through both layers onto that strip. Take the waste pieces out, take the strip out, lay your joint back. If you are unlucky or particularly heavy-handed, unlucky in that you keep hitting the same channel, these are not indestructible. You may get 8 to 10 joints out of one strip, okay? But if you are particularly heavy-handed, weighted-handed, you can cut through them quite easily, okay? So just bearing in mind when you are trimming the material on the wall, all you're trying to do is cut through 2 layers of vinyl and paper. So you can see that I lined the strip up with the edge of the, with the edge of the first piece. Make sure everything's laying flat back to the wall. If it's not tight, when you make your cut and lay it back, you'll have excess material there and you won't have made a good joint. So first one, lay that back nice and tight. Second one, repeat the process. Don't at this stage use your spatulas. With the plastic strip behind, if you put too much pressure on there, you can bruise the print. Okay, so just use your hand, make sure it's all nice and tight. If you're going to, there's got a bubble there, so I'm going to get rid of that, but I'm not going anywhere near the stripe. So the only thing, again, this is something I do, not necessarily in the instructions, but the joint is the most critical part. So if you've just been cutting your ceiling line, your internal corners, or your skirting the baseball lines with the blade, make sure you snap a fresh edge for when you do the joint, because you want it at its sharpest. Just to realise that if you are working at height, you get down off the steps at this point, you must, once you start the cut, you shouldn't take the knife out, because it's problematic trying to get back in at the same point, and you find you've cut a little slither out and it doesn't match up. So just ensure that you, as you come down off the steps, maybe move them out of the way with your feet or get a colleague to do it, but don't remove the knife once you've started the cut. So take the underlap out, take the strip out, remembering that this is now coated in adhesive. So it's no good just dropping it on the floor, it will get dirt, grit, mess. So sometimes clients don't like it, I tend to hang it over a door just to make sure that it stays where it is. Whichever one was at this point it's always good idea as well to make sure that there's sufficient adhesive there. So just feel the wall. Okay, this brush is a bit of a monster, but I'm going to put a little bit in there. So as I say, whichever was first to the wall, put that back to the wall again. Now you can see from the spatula that I'm doing there, I'm not actually crossing over onto the wall space, okay? Keep it here because you don't want the adhesive to be picked up by the spatula. Just lay it down onto the wall. Then the next thing, or this point where a lot of people go wrong, is that they just simply lay it over, and I'm sure with the black there that you can see that's overlapped. Okay, just tease it in with the tips of your finger to complete. I'm slightly out there. Good grief, I've mismatched it. But just feed it in with the tips of your fingers, and then you can get rid of the excess once I've got rid of the microphone. Thank you very much. So, thank you. Just one final thing. If you do, there is a little bit of adhesive squeezed out. It's quite watery, this adhesive. If you do get adhesive on there, and particularly if you're using the heavy duty one, don't wipe the material with a sponge, okay? Because all you'll do is spread it around. So clean water, soft bristle brush if it's dry, like a shoe shine brush, but not one that's been used to clean shoes. And if it's still wet, clean sponge, clean water, and dab to lift the adhesive off, rather than spreading it around, okay? That's it, thank you.
Thank you.